online can hear us. So the transcript anyway, so the recording can hear us. So that's the main thing. Welcome everybody to our second hybrid Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar, which is also joint with our our department's research seminar series. It's our 130th Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar. This week we have Fabrizio Colella presenting the heterogeneous effects of supporters on athletes' performance by skin colour. If you have questions you want to ask and you're in the audience, as per the last one, there'll be a slightly convoluted process because we can't hear you and we're not going to ignore you. But if you have a question, put the hand up team style and via my laptop, which I will join using, you'll be able to ask your question audibly. Or if you can access the chat, you can put this question in the chat and I can put the question to Fabrizio. I'm going to let Fabrizio take away his talk now. So Fabrizio, all yours. Oh, no, wrong way. Let's do that instead.
Oh, okay. Okay, this works. Okay, great. So thank you very much, James, for having me here, for the introduction, and thank you everybody that is also here in the audience and Reading. And
you tell them how many.
Yeah, we have a full room, about 35 people. It seems. I saw we have many people online as well. So yeah, thanks. Thank you everybody for being here. So yes, I'm gonna present this paper titled "The Heterogeneous Effect of Supporters on Athletes' Performance by Skin Color." So this is a paper on sport, but it's also a paper that looks at how people behavior impact the behaviors of other people or the performance in this case. So when I say people and people here, I refer in the first case, I refer to supporters that could have an impact with their behavior on the performance of other people that are in this case the players. But this could sit in a broader literature about how people affect each other. And before starting with presenting the paper, I want to talk about two important, I would say, for this talk, concepts that are two ways in which some people can influence others and in different ways. So one of them is the moral support. So moral support is defined as the support that a person can give to another, but could be only encouragement or psychological. So it's not that somebody could help. Moral support doesn't have nothing to do with like physical or some help. I help you to do something. It's just I encourage you to do something. And it was also shown that this could have a positive effect on productivity of people, on workers in particular. The second important topic is the racist behaviors at the workplace. So there are racist episodes at the workplace, and these behaviors could impact the well-being of people that suffer the racist abuses. And this could go in the other way around, because it could have a negative effect of the productivity of people, of workers, if we want think more in the broader literature of labor economics. So despite the importance of this phenomenon, there is scarce evidence, in particular about the second one, on the effect of racism on worker performance. And that's particular for a few reasons. So first of all, it's quite difficult to record episodes of racism at the workplace. It's quite difficult to also record productivity of workers and to have some shock to one of the two to understand what's going on. Football could help us in that case, or sports in general, because these two concepts are quite common in football. So no need to say to this audience that football is the world's most popular sport in terms of fans. And what happens in football is that supporters go to the stadium to support their players, so to boost the performance of their player through the moral support. And every week we see many players going to the stadium. Carl.
They also go to reduce the performance of the other guys, right?
Well,
that's a very the reality is a bit different, right? It's like a very nice way of looking at supporters. In reality, they go to shout abuse.
I didn't go down yet in the slide, as you can see,
Yeah.
but I fully agree with you.
Okay.
And then this enter also in the discussion, I would say, between moral support and psychological pressure also. That is has been analyzed in this literature. So yes, so I was now focusing on the support part, so that's the positive aspect. But as you anticipated, they could also have bad behavior, not only against the players of the other team, but I would say also, but again, against their own players if they don't perform. And one of this behavior is racism. So racist episodes are common in football, and they were recorded. They are recorded much more in a recent year. Is a very salient, I would say, phenomenon. And in particular in football, racism manifests mainly through the discriminatory behaviors of supporters against non-white players, in particular in European football. So that's just a picture of something that was happening in Serie A few years ago. So this is an AC Milan player playing against Atalanta, and there were these supporters of Atalanta were throwing a banana toward him as a racist abuse. So that's yeah, sorry. So that's just to say how salient the episode it is. So it's not only about chance and of course and the chance of supporters against, so insult to players, but even objects, throwing objects in that direction. This was quite I think a salient episode in Serie A a few years ago. I cannot. Okay, yes, okay, but football is not peculiar, I would say, in terms of the fact that there are these two forces playing a role that could be analyzed, but has been also shown to be a good setting to study human behavior for other reasons. First reason is because it's an highly competitive and professional work environment. So we know that players go there with a particular goal, which is playing good and winning the game. And this competition among them allows us to understand, to have a good measure of what is the goal of these players. The second reason is that, conversely than many other work environment, we have detailed and high frequency data on players' performance and at the individual level, and then that's probably the most, I would say, important reason why sport data are used in the economics. It's very nice to have all of these informations on performance. And the last one is that there are shocks in football. There are shocks. One of them are the shocks on supporters. So the fact that supporters go to the stadium is not always an endogenous decision, but it could be also exogenous, because it could be decided by some ban that federations make to supporters. For example, when there are, like, for racist abuses, for example, there were some ban in Europe, in South America, there were some ban to supporters because of violence, and most recently that the COVID-19 restrictions created this quite natural experiment that has been analyzed. I'm sure, but few people that are here in the audience today. One just raised the hand.
There's also variation in racism, right? Are you not observing that, or
variation in racism? You mean in time, or
time, or within? Not all crowds are racist.
No, true. So yes, so there is a. I will show you at some point some results that will take this heterogeneous effect into account, based also on the paper you were mentioning before that looks at this. So yes, so there is an heterogeneity in terms of crowds that could be exploited in that sense as a heterogeneous effect. Allow me to.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I had an idea, and sorry that this is more like a conversation. It's because there's only no one in the room. What about, like, visiting players who used to play for the old club? So a player who goes back to played for Inter and then suddenly plays for AC Milan. It's kind of like a control group, right? To check it. I don't know if you ever thought about that.
No, and I'm gonna write notes. So you mean that the same player is playing in the same stadium, for example, but for different teams, and then the crowd will impact differently.
Yeah. I've not seen that anywhere in the literature, and I'm probably just giving out an idea. But it's exact. It should be the same sort of mechanism, and you know the player's going to get abuse normally.
Yeah.
And it's not race, but it's something to compare the racism effects that you get against me.
I mean, the more broader kind of question is, you know, how do such coaches and players perform in those scenarios?
Yeah.
You know, do they perform better going back to a previous setting, or do they perform worse?
And you can identify whether it's the crowd, the fear of turning up in front of the home supporters, that how much of an effect that has, which is very similar. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I find this interesting. I think that there is even more variation, because sometimes when a player was playing for a team and then play with another team, there are usually two ways they could separate. It's like couples, I would say. So I think there are some players that go play against their old team, and they get support actually from the crowd, because they recognize that.
It's maybe too complicated then.
But there is well, no, I think what you said, yes, plays a role, and I think all of us, we have some ideas in mind about players that were moving, I don't know, from Madrid to Barcelona, for example, vice versa, actually. So that's definitely important on AC Milan and Inter. But yeah, I'm sure that there are abuses in that sense that are different than the racism one, and could be analyzed. Yeah, thanks. Okay, yeah. So what I was saying about the COVID restrictions in most of the European leagues, what happens during COVID period is that some of the games were playing without supporters, and this provides a nice natural experiment to understand the effect of supporters on performance of football players. So in this paper, I take advantage of the COVID-19 shock to supporters in the Italian Serie A, so in Serie A stadiums, to study the heterogeneous effect of football players' performance by skin color. So what I do is I take the picture of the players, I classify all players in white and non-white to a skin color recognition algorithm, and then I use informations on individual player performances from a fantasy sport website. So with these two informations, I then can compare how the performance of each player in two different periods with without supporters, and I see the heterogeneous effect of the supporters based on what is the skin color of the player. To give you a preview of what I find that 1.5%, I found that a 1.5% increase in the performance of non-white players compared to white players when supporters are not in the stadium. So sorry, there is a typo. It's not a -8%, it's 8%. So I think that literature estimated a positive effect of about 20% in terms of moral support. So if we take this 1.5% over what the literature estimates, this is about 8% of the total moral support. Total moral support on effect of moral support on performance. This result is robust to several controls that I will skip and tell you later during the presentations. But I want to underline here that there is no heterogeneous effect in terms of home and away games, and whether players playing on top or top clubs or not. And this was quite surprising, since my prior was that the players that play away are the ones that suffer more from these effects. So given that there were no, and I argue that there were no other particular changes that happened together with COVID that could affect players heterogeneously only based on their skin color, because there were other effects, of course, I argue that these results suggest that racial discriminations faced by non-white players can affect their performance. So this paper contributes to a few strands of the literature. The first one is the one on racism, well-being, and performance at work. So there are a few papers. They analyze settings like hospitals or like in the army to see how how racism could affect the performance of workers, but this literature is quite limited. Then there is the literature of sports, using sports data to understand human behavior. And here you see I put a few some papers there, and I guess most of you are familiar with this literature. There is a lot here about moral support, psychological pressures, home advantage, and also a set of papers using the COVID shock to identify the effect of moral support on performance. So, and the third one is the literature that look at racism among supporters, and the closest paper to this one is the one by Caselli and co-authors in 2021, which they use a similar setting, but they focus their attention on players of African players, or players of African origin. While I differentiate from this paper by the fact that my focus is mainly on the skin color, and the results I would say are quite similar. So I see the two papers somehow complementary to each other. Yes.
There's a question from online, which is racism towards UK players appears to take place mostly online or through social media these days. Where Ian, who's asking the question, says it's a long time since he's witnessed racism in the stands in England, and lots of online examples on Twitter and so on. And he wonders if you can say anything about the impact of COVID and crowd attendance on online racism.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't study that part in this paper. I agree that most of the racism moved toward online, and we can see also that the reaction actually of the FIFA or the UEFA, for example, goes in this direction. Before we would say before each Champions League game something like no to racism, and now we see like no to online abuses. So I fully agree. I checked some stats, and from all the episodes that are reported, still 60% are in the stadium. So I would say that the prevalence is still about what happens in the stadium. But I fully agree that we're going in the direction. And yeah,
there are surveys of professional footballers, though, when you ask them if they experience racism on the pitch, don't they? Like in the UK and other countries, there must be evidence that they feel, whether it's reported or noticed by the media or whatever, is very different to what people experience, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, there are studies out there on, or surveys of footballers that maybe help you with the motivation.
Yeah, I think this 60% that I mentioned is coming from this kind of surveys. I remember reading this, but I guess that's the thing. But yes, I agree that most of supporters reply to and answer to surveys in that sense and report that they got some abuse. I should have something here in the presentation about that. Okay, so let me now describe better the background and going in this setting. So this paper is about racism in football, and the racist incidents, as I mentioned before, in European football are growing. This growing is growing for two reasons. Probably they are growing, but also the report is growing. So there is much more awareness of the phenomenon. So if we look at numbers, we can see that there are more episodes now than before. How much underreport there was before is not clear. But so this growing refer to the reported one. Sorry. So racist episodes in the stadium, now to reply to your point, is 66% exactly. So are the most common. So there was this survey done. It's quite old though, 2018-19, but that was a result of found in Italy, and they analyzed more than 600 racist incidents, and 66% of them were happening in the stadium. I believe this number would be lower nowadays, but still, I guess that the prevalence is the same. So the victims are almost always the non-white players, and this is independent of the nationality. And we can have some examples also of racism in football while national teams are playing, and towards players that play at the same team and they have the same nationality but have different skin color. So many professional players reply to the surveys by saying that they've been victim of racist abuses that usually are manifest toward chances of verbal abuses by supporters, or even worse, as we saw the picture before, through objects that get thrown to them. The Italian Serie A, for probably this crowd is almost no need to explain, but let me just say something. The Italian Serie A consists of about 20 teams which play against each other twice in each season. So there are, in average, every week 320,000 supporters that watch games in live stadium. It is a bit lower than in the Premier League, where I think that the average is about 40,000 per game, so 400,000 supporters. In 2020, what happened? Because of COVID, the Serie A game schedule discontinued in March, and then it resumed in June. So after 1 month and a half, in June 20. But the rest of the game, instead of being playing with supporters in the stadium as before, they were played under closed door. So all individuals, but managers and staff, were preventing to enter the stadium, and this gave a discontinuity in the supporters. So 130 games out of 380 of the 2019-2020 Serie A season were played without the supporters. I have this illustration just to give the idea of what's happened. So here it's a full stadium. You might probably understand what is my team from here. and then so before they were, you can imagine a full stadium, like it was like Tuesday, this stadium here, and then you see that after there are no supporters at the stadium anymore. So these players that you see here in the screen from before to after, they cannot anymore count on to the support of their own fans, but they also have a lower exposure to the negative behavior, especially racist behavior of the fans, and that's the variation I exploit in this paper. I mainly start from my main analysis is based on two things. The first one is the two ingredients. The first ingredient is the score given to each player, and the second ingredient are the pictures that are used to classify the players by skin color. So the first information is coming from fantacalcio.it, which is a website for fantasy football platform. So Fantacalcio assigns a score between 0 to 10 to each player after each game based on individual performance. The beauty of this variable is that it is fully objective because it's computed by an algorithm. It takes into account many factors, such as like the passes, the shots, the dribbles, tackles, everything that these players do. So it's not like, it's much more rich than statistics, for example, like cards or number of goals, which is also recorded and taken into account in this measure. Fantacalcio.it also contains other information on players' characteristics like age, weights, nationality, and where they play in the field. The second source, yes.
Could you consider just minutes played? Because if a player is playing better, then he's likely to be kept on the pitch for longer. And the only trickiness, of course, for this period is the number of substitutions went up as well. But, you know, the manager takes a player off if he's not doing well, right?
Yeah.
It's a very simple measure of performance, but it should go in the same way.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I just that's what you said. So yeah, so minutes played can be another measure as goals or everything. I believe this is quite accurate. So
yeah.
And you have like for every players you have variation, and I guess minutes could also be. It's a lot related to the field position, right? It's like if you're a defender, it's much less likely, for example, to get substituted. So yeah, definitely is another measure that I could look at to see whether it's consistent with the results. But I still would argue that this individual score is more detailed.
And then do you have information on how much those players have experienced crowds in the past? So my concern could be that due to selection, non-white players maybe are used to playing in front of big stadiums more, and therefore their absence has a bigger effect on them in whatever direction, or whatever, you know, the habitualization to having a crowd there could be differential because of, you know, non-white players are more likely to be international, so they like to play in smaller leagues than what you're probably is in your sample. That would be my only possible counter argument to your identification, possibly.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. So I don't look at previous experience, which I could actually look at and see, but I have some heterogeneous effect by whether they play for big teams or like lower teams, and I don't see much difference there. So I think
that's probably
this would somehow answer in the sense that the players in big teams probably have more experience in terms of being exposed to supporters. Yeah, so the second information I was saying are the pictures, and they are coming from two websites. The first one is soccerwiki.org, which is a free soccer-oriented wiki platform. So it collects information on players, and this is the main source of pictures for me, but some of them were missing, so I complement them with the information coming from transfermarket.com, which is a very popular football website. So combine these two databases together, I have pictures for about 557 players, which account almost for all the sample. The last database is called the reta.it, which is the Italian version of Flash Score, will be here in UK, which has stats on games and also an indicator for whether the game was played under closed door or not. And this information is taken from that website. So my information on COVID is not only the period, which is quite consistent also with the closed door policy, but is especially like this indicator that says each game how it was played, because at the very beginning there were some games that were played under closed door but still, and some game not, so it was most staggered the introduction. So I look at this in a very precise way, I would say. So I move now to the classification, but we have a question by Daniel.
Yeah, so if you hit mute on there, so if you move that one out. Okay, if you move that bit out, you should be able to put mute on. Yeah, so mute yourself there. When I hit the mute button at the top. Yeah, so yeah, that one.
Yeah, can I ask my question?
And
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah, so actually my question was about sort of the algorithm for classifying, players. Is this completely automatic, or did you supplement it with just sort of manual raters looking at people and see, what their perception is?
So thanks. Wait. I first need to
Go on.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for this question. So as you can see, there is written classification, and I'm gonna now to explain this. But just to give a preview, it's fully automated. I didn't complement with any other source of information. So there is nothing, let's say, manual going on or human classification.
Okay, I mean,
sorry, a second. We need to switch again.
okay. I mean, I think it wouldn't hurt to have a sort of cross-validation of the algorithm and just make sure that it's not doing anything funny.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I will definitely do it. I had some cross-validation that if we can call like this, which means like myself looking at like 20 people, but it's not really a real cross-validation. So yeah, I could do that. Thanks.
There's also on whoscored.com the same thing. We use it. I'm using it in a paper. James has used it in papers.
The rating.
Yeah, the whoscored, which is based on Opta statistics, and again it's their own algorithm. But this is just an alternative. I don't. It could be the same thing. It could be.
This is for the performance, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
It uses everything. Position on the pitch that they kicked the ball and length attacking. Exactly the same, I think.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so yeah, I think this was the question was more about the skin color, I think, classification.
Oh, right. Okay.
But
Sorry.
but for what you suggested, I think I remember when I was starting this asking Octacore, I think this firm that collects many informations, and they sent me a bill which was quite difficult to pay, so I went for this other.
But instead, you go to the Who Scored website.
And you get
the
this
data's all
information.
there. Yeah.
Okay.
Lionel Page and Roman Gurrier pay for Optastats, right?
Do they?
I think so.
You probably get a lot more for paying for them, but you can get a heck of a lot from the Who Scored website.
Okay, I'll definitely have a look. Thanks. Okay, so I explained how I classified players. Okay, so I start like this. I use the first step is to isolate the skin. So if we see a picture of a player, we need to understand what is skin, what is not skin. There could be a background of everything. So to isolate the skin, I use this algorithm that was developed in 2020 that leverages two different scales. So one is the HSV and the other one is the YCB-CR. In practice, what this algorithm does is takes the image, take each pixel of the image and convert this pixel to the HSV scale. Once it has the pixel in the HV scale, it applies a thresholding technique to understand whether this pixel could be skin or could be something different. It does this for each of the three measures here that is what the H, S, and V stands for. Then it replicates exactly the same algorithm for the other scale, the YCB-CR. And at the end of the day, then combining these two scales, it could have a very good description of which pixels are potentially skin and which pixels are potentially not. So after I do this, so imagine like if we take a picture, between 1/3 and half of the pixels are preserved and the other ones are eliminated. To give you an example here, I have a figure of two players. Those are two Italian players playing were playing at different point for the national team as well. As you can see from the picture, there are some differences in terms of skin color also. So what the algorithm does is taking only the pixel that are most likely skin. You can see that it's not like that you see only the skin, right? So you can see from the picture from the guy on the left that you have some parts that are not skin, but so of course it's not perfect, but that's how it works. So that's the first step. So let's take the skin from the picture. The second step is classifying pixels. So to classify pixels, I use this Fitzpatrick phototyping scheme, which is quite common in dermatology research. What this scale does, just classify, is a classification of 6 different types of skin color, which goes from the most light one to the most dark one. So what do I do here? I take each pixel of this masked figure, so the figure in the panel B you saw before, and for each pixel, I convert again the pixel in the RGB coordinates, and I use this library to understand to measure the distance between each pixel in the picture and each of the 6 colors in the scale. Once I do this, I'm able to get the smallest distance between the pixel of the skin color of the skin and the pixel of the scale. So I'm able to give to each pixel of the figure one of the 6 categories. I go back to the example before. So you remember that here in the scale, the type 1 is the most light and the type 6 is the most dark. And here is a distribution of pixels of the pictures that I showed you before in terms of scale. It's quite easy to see that for the first one, the types from 1 to 4 are like more common, while for the second one, the darker color are more common. So that's also, I would say, also a way to go back to the question before to validate that seems going in the right direction, at least from these 2 examples. So now the last step. The last step is from these informations that you see here, classifying players and having just a binary classification into white and non-white. So to do this, I do like two cutoffs. The first one is considering which of these 6 categories are white and which are non-white. And to do this, I consider as white here all the types from 1 to 4. Why do I do this? Because mainly most players in the Italian league are Italians, and most players, most Italian people have a skin color that is between number 4 and number 3. And by construction, of what is in the back of my mind, at least when I construct this, is that the supporters, what they do is having racist behavior toward people that have the darker skin color, not toward the ones that they perceive to be similar somehow. So the index equals to the share of pixels in each category. So once I do this, then in the categories 1 to 4. So I simply get what is the share of pixels that follow in the category from 1 to 4. And after I do this, I classify as non-white all the players with an index above a threshold 0.6 that I tell you now how I constructed. So to get these thresholds, I just did a step regression with 9 categories, one for each decile of the distribution, and see how when the regression peak, because it peak at them where the majority of players, and this was exactly before 0.6. So to go back to what I said before, that the share of Italians are in that sense. So this allow me to have a sort of cutoff that tells, okay, which are the players that are somehow darker than the majority here that are the Italian players. So once I do all this step, I ended up, yes, the question, just finish this slide. I ended up with this index that then will translate into this binary classification, white, non-white. And here is the example again. You see that the index is 0.8 in the left one and 0.4 in the right one. And one is classified as white and the other one as non-white.
Go on, Alex.
Thank you. Yeah. So I have a question, because I was thinking about this type of machine algorithm to study the color. But then the question is, in the end, it's people who decide whether to discriminate or to chant against somebody on a color base. And then it's actually the people who decide whether somebody is black or non-black. And my question is, did you try to go to people and to ask like 3 students or 5 students to categorize the players? And why do you think the algorithm, the computer algorithm, is better in identifying this than people? Because in the end, you also have some subjective things here, right? It's not entirely non-biased in terms that you have something to say here as a researcher when you decide about type 1, type 2, 0.6, although it was kind of based on some non-parametric analysis. So that's my question.
Yeah, so I think that's an important point, and I have 2 replies in that sense. So the first one is, I didn't have students to ask for that. It's quite simple, but no. But the second one is that if you get this information from, even if, like as you said, like from 3 students or from 5 students, this could be probably closer to what will be the idea of the black versus non-black within the students community, but this could differ, for example, from which is the one among supporters, right? So ideally, what I will do is to ask to people that used to go to the stadium to classify these players. I think that my solution is just to get something that is completely exogenous and objective to avoid any kind of bias in the classification that could arise from somehow asking the wrong person. So that was the main concern. But yeah, that's also related to what the validation question that was asked before. So yeah, maybe I should do this and just to validate the analysis, so to have a good reply to that. Thanks.
Presentation, it'd be good maybe to show the two marginal cases, right?
Yes.
Just to make, I don't know, it's only presentational. Just show the two either side of the cutoff as well.
Yeah, true. Yes, my idea was to show to non-marginal to make clear, right? Because with the marginal, then you wouldn't know how to judge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can show some others to see how it goes. And I believe, like, as you can see, as you could see here, that there could be some mistakes, right? In the sense that here you see part of the skin that is not actually skin, and this could happen with some other things. So I don't think it's perfect. So and my claim is not that it's perfect, but my claim is that it's objective. So if anything, this will not work. But if the results are robust to this kind of classification, I would expect that with the real one would be even stronger. But yeah, I could show some more cases. So after this, I ended up with a sample with about 11,000 observations, 20 teams, 557 players who played 380 games. Among them, 130 are played without the supporters. The skin color classification result is that about 15.4% of the players are non-white, and this is somehow stable between home and away games. To do the analysis, I restrict the sample to players playing more than 3 games in each part of the season, and then I have some robust to check whether this was playing a role. And I remain with a sample of 9,000 observations. Here, an observation is a player game pair. Some descriptives about this, as I mentioned before, 14% of the players are 14% of the players are classified as non-white. Of course, there is a big correlation with the continent of origin in the passport. You see 73% of the players from Africa are classified as non-white. But there is also some important share of players that are non-white in both in America and in Europe. If we look in the other direction, we could see that most of the non-white players that are in the sample are not actually coming like from Africa, but they have a European passport. They could have some origin, of course, from the other continents. There is some variation in terms of big teams and small teams. The top 6 Italian teams, they have a greater share of non-white players, which is consistent with the fact they also have a greater share of foreign players. And if we consider the two samples, so games with supporters and without supporters, when supporters are not in the stadium, the share of non-white players is slightly higher.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So regarding the classification, so you can see ASA people are classified as white. So
sorry?
ASA players, they are all classified as white.
Yes. So because the classification is white, non-white, right? So yeah. There is no other other classification here, and what I follow is the scale here, right? So if imagine that there is a sort of cutoff here, everything that happens here that could be here and in this direction could be this. I understand that this is not perfect, but given that there are only 8 players in all the sample, I don't think it is worth to go and have a third classification, thinking that probably there are some racism toward the Asian players in that sense. I'm not aware of particular episodes, at least in Serie A, but I don't think this would play a role given that there are only few. Okay, good. So this is just a descriptive figures to show the which plots the average grade in the games that were played with supporters and without supporters. As you can see, that's already a sort of preview of the results. You see that for non-white players, the average grade was significantly lower than the average grade of white players when supporters were in the stadium. When there are no supporters in the stadium, basically it's difficult to distinguish between the two. And in my empirical analysis, I try to show how this effect is persistent despite having other controls. Yes.
I apologize if I'm getting ahead, but the ratings are endogenous to your teammates.
Okay.
So your performance depends on your teammates. So if you also said that more black players play with more black players.
Mm-hmm.
So the estimates, they're biased upwards because the knock-on effects on your teammates. That would be my prior. I mean, I almost wonder if the unit of analysis is almost the team performance, the average rating in the team. Because the, or with the within team variation in those who score ratings as well, that could be useful, which I guess you're going to go for.
Yes, so the results I will show is within team.
Right.
And yeah, how the distribution is, I told you like the share are higher in big teams, but how this distribution of black players in team look like, I don't know. I imagine it could be quite okay, like quite normally distributed, but yes, if it's very polarized, like teams with 0 black players and teams with only black players, this would be a case. And I definitely need to show the distribution of this, and I think if the distribution is not crazy, that will be okay. But yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Carl. Okay, so yeah, empirical specification. So I regress. It's a standard diff model. So I regress the Y, which is the score attributed to a player that plays in a particular team during a particular game, and this game was played in one of the serial turn T. So in total we had 38 turns, and there are 10 games played in each turn. I regress this on a dummy, which is equal 1 if the player is categorized as non-white, and another dummy, which is equal 1 if the game was played under closed door, and then the interaction between the two. That's the standard definition. Then, depending on the specification, there are different set of controls and also player, team, and turn fixed effect, which of course then can make some of these coefficients redundant. What's the identifying assumption here is that the absence of other factors that could affect the performance of non-white players over the one of white players, and that could affect this contemporaneously with the closed stadium policy. As I mentioned at the beginning, so I agree that there could be other factors that played a role during the COVID pandemic and with the closed stadium policy, but the assumption here that they would not impact players in different way based only on the skin color of the players, despite controlling for very detailed characteristics of those players, including the nationality. And the standard comma trend assumptions that is characteristics of the definitive settings, and I will show some robustness if time allows for that. The main result of the paper is the player performance. So this table shows the results of the analysis that I mentioned before, and what you see here is the main coefficient of interest is the interaction term between non-supporters and non-white players. So what all these different columns are different specifications that include different controls. You see that the effect is quite stable and significant over all the specifications, including the most conservative one, that is the one that has the player and turn fixed effect in addition to the team fixed effect. So the variation is really here coming from the fact that a player is playing better or worse before and after the season.
So what's turn fixed effect?
Yeah, turn fixed effect is this turn of the league. So we have 38 seasons, so it's a time variable somehow. I think given that there was this break in March, I understand that the term will be more like linear in what was happening. So whether you play at the very beginning of the season or the very end, that's the idea that is capturing.
One of the labels round.
Around, yeah, okay. Yeah, actually.
So the team fixed
In
effect.
Italy we say week, that's why I was like, okay, maybe.
The team fixed effect is the team over the whole season or the team today?
No, the team is the team over the whole season. Yeah. So yeah, there is the team, and then there is a turn. So this is like say, and in this specification also the individual.
The team today would not allow you to identify anything, right? Because that's team today is before and after. It's just correlated with COVID, right?
Well, it should still allow because there is the interaction with the supporter. So you go within. Will not allow, of course, to have this one anymore.
Sure. That's what I mean.
Okay, so you think that I should have team interacted with round fixed effect to be more specific about the team.
I'm worried about that co-worker effect.
Yeah.
And so you could do that, or you could put the score in of the co-workers.
Yeah, I put the score, like team goals. This is the number of goals that the team would make.
The average rating.
Ah, okay, yes. So like a one out thing. Yeah, okay.
That's a control for how everybody else is doing, which
Yeah.
should condition on how that's affecting my rating.
Yeah. So yeah, somehow this role I was expecting was playing from the team goals. So like if the team scores some goals, it's good. But okay, yeah, I will have a look also at the interaction you suggest in terms of fixed effect. And I go into heterogeneous effect. I think I need to leave some time for Q&A. Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I will give you some brief information on the heterogeneity analysis that I made. One is the game characteristics. So here what I look is heterogeneous effect between on games and away games, and heterogeneous effect between top team and non-top team of the league. You see the first interaction here, and I do this all for the most conservative specification that it was the last column in the table before. You see the effect remains here. Sorry. You see that the effect remain there in the first line, and then there is never anything significant going on when we have these interactions for the home game and out team, even if we had all the two of them together. And this was quite surprising, I would say, but I also say something about the fact that really racist behaviors of supporters is not only an instrument to, as we said at the beginning, make the opponent playing worse. It's mostly like a sort of bad behavior itself that sometimes happen to impact the home players as well as the away players. The other heterogeneous analysis they do looks at players' characteristics. So this here I divide players I divide players based on what is their role in the field, whether they are defenders, strikers, or midfielders, and I divide players based on what is the quartile in terms of distribution, using the grades they were accumulating in the pre-period. So I just classify players based on how strong they are, in other words. And so for the main effect, you see that there is a significant and negative effect in the interactions with strikers, meaning, and if you see, it's even bigger than the main effect that we see here. So this is somehow telling us that the strikers are not suffering this issue. My idea was that probably strikers' performance matter much more whether they score or not, or other subject that will change their grade, their score more important than other variations. But so there is an heterogeneous effect in that sense. And instead, when we look at quartiles, we see that there is a negative coefficient for all the quartiles above the first one, and for the third one is big and significant. Also in this case is offset the 1 year. So it seems that there is something going on in terms of distribution. If we look at the sign of these coefficients, we could conclude that most of the effect is driven by the weaker players. that are in the first quartile of the distribution. The third heterogeneous analysis that they do is looking at nationality versus skin color. So, and this is also following the paper I mentioned before. So you see here in this table, it's a different format for space reasons. So these are the regressors, and the dependent variable is always player performance. So here I regress together with the normal analysis. I regress them interactions for non-supporters and non-white. Then I control also for the control before, so including the player fixed effect, which take into account the place where the players were coming from, and I interact this with the non-supporters. We see that for Africa we have a coefficient of 0.06, 0.03 for America, 0.2 for Asia, but none of them is significant, while the non-supporter non-white continues to be significant. Even if we interact this nationality with a non-white dummy, we still see nothing significant. So what I argue with this table is that most of the effect is driven by the skin color of the player rather than the nationality. And this, I think, it's consistent with many episodes that we witnessed, unfortunately, in stadiums. That really, this racism is really going toward players because of their skin color without considering other subjects. Another heterogeneous effect that I did following the paper by Caselli and co-authors is, and it goes to the question that Carl asked before, is interacting this with a dummy that is equal to 1 if the stadium where the player were playing as away players is a racist stadium. So the stadium experienced some more racist episodes in the past. And here I see a significant positive effect, which is also consistent with the results mentioned in the other paper. So it seems that really this is the effect is stronger in stadiums that have usually lots of this negative effect negative effect, lots of this effect of racism episodes. So I go very quickly into the robustness. The first set is sample selection. As I said, I exclude some players, the player that we didn't play many games. And then here I do the sample selection robustness. So I include all the players, even the ones that played only a few minutes. I include only the players that played more than 10 games, so the ones that played quite often. And I exclude the goalkeepers because the goalkeepers, they were all classified as non-white, so this could play a role. None of this was biasing the results, and the results remained significant in all the three sample, as this figure shows. Last one is a sort of placebo effect. So I consider only games that were played in the first part of the season. I construct a placebo band variable, which takes value 1 only for games that were played after the 10-13. So this is a placebo test, but at the same time is also a test for the common trend. So it will tell me if there will be some strange trend between the performance of white and non-white players during the period even before COVID. I replicate the main analysis and I basically find no differences between and after. So there was a sort of common trend. The common trend analysis, the common trend assumption is satisfied in that part of the distribution. Okay, great. I think I reached the end of my presentation, so I can conclude here. So in this paper, I show the heterogeneous effect of supporters on performance by skin color. There was a significant increase, or I found a significant increase of 1.5% in the performance of non-white players relative to white players when fans are not in the stadium. The effect is quite sizable, is robust to controlling for citizenship. It's not heterogeneous in terms of game characteristics of players, in terms of game characteristics or team characteristics. There is some heterogeneity in terms of players, and the effect is stronger where in the stadium that are classified as racist based on the episodes they experienced in the past. So all these, I think, suggest that the racial discriminatory behavior of supporters have a negative effect on performance of the players that suffer this behavior. Okay, thank you very much.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So regarding your constraint assumption, so although you ran some placebo kind of regression, so I still have doubt of that. So basically you treat white players as the control group. Yeah, you treat the white players as the control group. So could it be possible that the supporters could boost the performance of the white players? No. So they could have negative effects if there are no supporters in the stadium for white players, because I think you have sort of finger about the performance of the white and non-white players. So I think during the COVID period, the performance of the white players has decreased a little bit.
True.
So could that be some negative effect from without non-supporters?
True, and I think it is, and I think there are several studies that I also mentioned before that show this. So we believe that there is, at least from the literature, we know that there is home advantage. We know that there is a positive effect of supporters on performance of players. So as the graph was showing, the performance of white players went down.
Yeah.
So the effect is all relative with respect to what happened to the white players, to the white players. So I say it's a control group, but doesn't mean that in this control group nothing changes in the control group. Something changes in the control group as it should be. Otherwise, there would be no need to have a control group, right? Something changes in the control group, and then we see how for the treatment group things change with respect to what are the changes in the control group.
So the treatment effects is not kind of the effect from supporters to white player to non-white players, but kind of the difference between the white and the non-white players.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why it's a definitive analysis. Yeah.
Okay.
If I would have to assume that there were zero differences for white players, I wouldn't need to do a definitive analysis. I would just use only non-white players and see how they changes, right? So that's why I need this control group. It's not an experimental setting. Yeah.
So I had similar comments to James's paper, which you may know, on the effect of COVID on player performance a while back, which is that I see football as a production. Those ratings are a production of how the whole match is produced. So they're a function of how many black players are on the opposition team and how many black players are on my team. So I think with a robustness check, or you should find the same results if you aggregate things up to the match level.
I see.
In terms of performance scores, even using the same performance scores but aggregated up, taking some geometric mean or whatever type of mean or average you want to take.
Okay.
You should find the same thing, right? But you're not. I don't know. You're collapsing your N, so you're making stars harder to find. That's a good thing as well in a way. If you use the variation across matches, well, is it really any different to the variation across players? But you're really controlling for a lot more stuff. You're controlling for.
Well, yeah, I think there are pros and cons. So, first of all, you need variation across teams. So if in most of the team there are like 3 black players almost every time, it doesn't work, right? So again, that's why I said like it's my bad I didn't show any distribution. But if we see the distribution of number of players per team, or number of non-white players per team, we could understand how much variation we have there. So what you're saying is that, okay, we could classify classify teams based on in white and non-white based on the share of white players they have, and then see whether they perform better or worse.
And those performance ratings that you're using, they are for the time on the pitch, whether it was 1 minute or 90 minutes, right? So you can also weight
if it's
it by
1 minute,
minutes
they don't have. I think it's at
Sure.
least 20 minutes.
Yeah. But you can also weight it by the amount of minutes on the pitch as well. So it's really the proportion of minutes on the pitch by black players.
Yeah.
That should, if it's consistent, that should predict.
Yeah.
exactly the same thing, right? Average. And you pick up the spillover effects as well, which is slightly different to your individual. You pick up the possibility of spillover effects to other players' performance. And so yes, it's a less, I don't know if it's a less labor economics-y nice paper for a labor economics journal because they want the individual performance effects. But sports isn't all, this sport, football, isn't all individual performance, it's team performance, which makes it more complicated. Which is nice as well, because you've got the whole team dimension to look into as well, which is fun.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I think I started actually like another paper of football that I have, and most of the other paper I've been reading are all at team level. So I was quite excited when I started to have the individual performance. I think it's good to have it and to explore. But as you said, it will be interesting to see what happens also at team level. Yes. Yeah, sure. The literature are a bit different, so, but yeah, I will do it. Thanks.
Looks like that's a bit like the market test for racism that Stefan Szymanski has in his paper to look at the team differences.
The basketball.
No, he looked at English football in the 80s.
Ah, yes, I know. Yeah. I think he also has one on basketball, if I'm not wrong. Where in basketball in US is the opposite, right? It's the black players that the white that gets discriminated.
Basketball's more complicated because not all the referees are white.
Yeah.
Where you can it's important to make the point to an American author that all the referees, American reviewer, all the referees are white.
Yes, indeed. I think it's that's basketball paper is about this. They see also the skin.
Yeah, the Wolf, Pope and Berger and Pope. Anyway.
Yeah. No. Yes. I don't know whether Stefan is in the audience or
He often is, but
or not. But yeah, I had some.
Otherwise, he would have probably made that point himself.
Yeah. I know. I talked with him about this.
Okay. Daniele's got a question on Teams, so if you want to mute up there, I can unleash him.
Yeah. So, can you hear me?
Yep.
Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one thing, just picking up on a suggestion that was made already, look at playing time. Yes, this website, does thing with this, great algorithm, but all these statistics, I think there's always a little bit of a concern, especially for defensive players, that measuring defensive actions is not as easy to do in football than offensive actions. So playing time is picking up whatever the intangibles, what the coach sees as sort of good performance. So I think it's definitely worth to look at that as well. The other comment that I have is, could you? I'm curious to see, are there differences in the performance of black versus white players in weekend games versus weekday games in the pre-period? Okay, and could it be that there are sort of other sort of distractions that were not there in during the COVID period that affected performance? And I think I raised this comment also a couple of months ago when somebody was presenting a similar paper on the NBA and performance of blacks versus whites in the bubble. And I hope that's not the case, but it comes up.
Yeah, thanks. So these weekend games versus weekday games, I think is definitely doable because it would be just like control taking also other games, right? Before, so I could check Champions League or Italian Cup, even though usually the games that are played in weekends are different than the ones that are playing in weekdays, right? So usually
but there are some Serie A games that are played on weekdays.
Okay, so you mean like the Friday or Monday, for example?
No, there are midweek rounds as well. There are occasion, not too many. There's like the sample is smaller, but there are matches played on Wednesdays and Thursdays.
So you think if there is some difference there, then probably the people that could go to the stadium can be different based on when the game is played, and this could play a role.
No, I mean I'm thinking, say that you know, people go out on Saturday night and they party, and maybe there are, you know, differences there, and that is less likely to happen on a Tuesday night. I don't know.
It's an interesting heterogeneous analysis to do. I agree, and see whether, to see also, like, you know, maybe in the, so it would be also a result, right, showing that in particular days.
Because I think that, yeah, I mean, I find the no difference between home and away matches a little bit surprising, and you know, it doesn't quite fit with the racism story.
Yeah, I agree. I was surprised as well, but honestly, then I check again the episodes, and there is a lot of racism towards own players. Like, I don't know, England team after the Euro Cup final, for example, or I can.
Yeah,
There are
I agree.
like that. So yeah, I was surprised as well, and then I was like, I check, and now I'm less surprised. Let's say I think it could play a role. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks. I will definitely do this heterogeneity between weekdays and weekend. Thanks.
Any more questions and comments online or here in the room?
Okay, apparently not.
Apparently not. So thank you very much, Fabrizio. In terms of rounding up, we will meet again, not next week. There's the Sports Economics, Sports Management Conference in Budapest next week, which many folk will be at. And we don't meet the week after either. And we return, therefore, in 3 weeks' time with Dennis Coates presenting on an as yet to be confirmed title. So see you here again online, not hybrid, in 3 weeks' time, because Dennis will be in Maryland in the US. But see you all soon. Thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, see you soon.
Thank you again for joining.